Jaime Osuna was no ordinary prisoner. His tattoos were a testament to the darkness that lurked within him, a man whose life had been defined by violence and hatred. Osuna had been in and out of trouble for most of his life, and by the time he arrived at Corcoran State Prison in California, he had already committed heinous acts. He was serving a life sentence for the brutal murder of Yvette Peña in 2011, a crime that involved unspeakable cruelty. But it wasn't just his past that terrified people, it was the man he had become. With his face covered in disturbing tattoos, symbols of his satanic beliefs, and a reputation for extreme violence, Osuna was known as a dangerous individual, even in a prison full of violent criminals. He had no remorse for the pain he caused, and that made him a ticking time bomb, just waiting for the right moment to explode. It was in 2019 that Jaime Osuna's story took a horrifying turn. At this point, Osuna had spent years in prison, and as fate would have it, he was placed in a cell with another inmate named Luis Romero. Romero had spent 27 years behind bars, convicted of second-degree murder. Unlike Osuna, Romero had maintained good behavior throughout his incarceration, earning him the possibility of parole. He was on the brink of freedom, having paid his dues for the crime he had committed years ago. But despite his efforts to reform, Romero was about to become part of a twisted and horrifying story that no one could have seen coming. On the 9th of March, 2019, the routine at Corcoran State Prison was like any other day. The guards walked the hallways, making their rounds, while the inmates carried out their daily tasks, trapped within the walls of their cells. The tension inside the prison was always palpable after all. It was home to some of the most dangerous criminals in the world. But this day, the tension would reach its peak. As night fell, Osuna, whose cell was shared with Luis Romero, began to prepare for the act of violence he had been planning for days. The details of his thoughts and intentions were unclear, but the brutality of what happened next was beyond comprehension. Osuna had crafted a weapon from whatever materials he could find. It wasn't much, but it was enough. His victim, Romero, had no idea what was coming. Osuna attacked Romero with a speed and ferocity that left no room for escape. The violence was so extreme that it quickly became clear that Romero had no chance. Osuna slashed at him, the sound of metal cutting through flesh and bone echoing through the cell. But the attack didn't stop there. Osuna, fueled by something darker within him, didn't just kill Romero, mutilated him, disfiguring his body in the most grotesque manner imaginable. Romero was decapitated, his eye removed, his face sliced open into a grotesque smile. Osuna took things even further. He cut off one of Romero's fingers and ripped out part of his lung. But perhaps the most chilling detail of the crime was what Osuna did next. He fashioned a necklace out of Romero's body, parts a macabre display of his twisted sense of triumph over his victim. To Osuna, this act wasn't just about killing. It was about making a statement, marking his territory in the most horrifying way possible. The horror of this crime, however, wasn't immediately recognized. At first, the prison guards failed to notice what was happening. During their rounds, they reported that both men were alive, as if everything was normal. This gross negligence allowed the violence to unfold unchecked. It wasn't until hours later, when a fellow inmate screamed in terror, that the guards finally investigated what had transpired in cell 14. When the guards opened the door, the scene that met their eyes was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Romero's mutilated body lay on the floor, unrecognizable. The brutality of the crime left even the most seasoned prison staff stunned and shaken. The prison, which had long been a place of violence, had never seen anything quite like this. Jaime Osuna was quickly removed from the cell, and the prison authorities began their investigation into the crime. But what followed was a series of shocking revelations. For one, the prison guards had not followed proper procedures. Their rounds had been incomplete, and they had failed to notice any signs of distress in the cell. This failure to act, combined with their falsification of reports, sparked an internal investigation into Corcoran State Prison's practices. Despite being arrested for the murder, Osuna's story wasn't over. He was sent to a psychiatric facility where he was diagnosed with several mental health disorders. Osuna was found to be suffering from schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. However, his mental state didn't excuse his actions. The brutality of the crime, his cold-bloodedness, and the way he orchestrated the attack spoke to a much deeper darkness. As the investigation into the crime continued, it became clear that there had been serious failures in the prison system. 2 guards were disciplined for their failure to notice Romero's condition and for not properly checking on the inmates during their rounds. However, many believed that the consequences for the guards' negligence were far too light. How could such a horrific crime happen when the system was designed to prevent exactly this kind of violence? Luis Romero's family was devastated by his death. He had been so close to freedom. He had spent nearly 3 decades in prison, hoping for a second chance. His family had been waiting for the day he would walk out of the prison gates, a free man. But instead, they were left with an unimaginable loss. Romero's death didn't just take away a father, a brother, and a son. It also highlighted the glaring failures in the justice system. The investigation into Romero's death prompted public outrage. How could a man so close to earning his freedom be murdered in such a brutal way? How could the prison system, which was meant to protect the inmates and keep them safe, fail so spectacularly? These questions, though critical, would remain unanswered for some time. As Osuna faced charges for the murder of Romero, his case became a symbol of the broken system that allowed this tragedy to happen. The failure of the prison guards, the lack of oversight, and the negligence that led to the attack raised serious questions about the safety of inmates and the responsibility of prison staff to protect them. Luis Romero's family, devastated but determined to seek justice, fought for accountability. They demanded not only that Osuna be held responsible for the brutal murder, but also that the prison system be held accountable for the failure that allowed it to happen. They were not just fighting for their loved one. They were fighting for every person who had been failed by a system that was supposed to protect them. As the years went on, the story of Jaime Osuna and Luis Romero continued to reverberate through the halls of Corcoran State Prison. The crime, with its shocking brutality, exposed the flaws in the prison system and forced the world to confront the dark realities of life behind bars. But the story didn't end there. Jaime Osuna's actions would serve as a stark reminder of the dangers that can arise when a system fails to recognize the true nature of those who inhabit it. His crime, though horrific, was not just an act of murder. It was a reflection of the failures of a prison system that, for too long, had allowed violence to go unchecked. The tragic death of Luis Romero left a hole in the lives of his family. They had hoped for a future with him, a future where he could walk free and start over. Instead, they were left with pain, confusion, and anger. The murder of Romero was not just the loss of one man. It was a reminder of the many failures that contributed to the violence. What happened at Corcoran State Prison that night in 2019 was a tragedy, but it also served as a wake-up call for those who are responsible for overseeing the prison system. The question remains, how many more tragedies will it take before the system is truly reformed? How many more families will have to suffer before the necessary changes are made? As for Jaime Osuna, his story serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist within people and the ways in which society at times fails to protect itself from it. While Osuna's fate may be sealed, the story of Luis Romero and the lives he left behind will continue to live on. Their legacy is a lesson in the dangers of complacency and a stark reminder of the need for accountability, reform, and justice. The world may never truly understand the full extent of what happened behind the walls of Corcoran State Prison on that fateful night. But one thing is clear: Jaime Osuna's crime will forever be etched in the history of the prison system, a reminder of the dangers lurking within, and a warning that sometimes the greatest threats come from the places we least expect.